Hey guys, Hollow1 here. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be repainting this K-Line Cotton Belt RS-3 into the Reading Company paint scheme, and we're going to be trying to fix up a couple broken details and make it look a little bit more realistic along the way. So I guess the first question is, why am I doing this? Well, the Reading had a lot of RS-3s, and they pulled everything from passenger to freight. They did switching duty. They did pretty much anything you could possibly imagine. These are road switcher engines, and the Reading put them to the test when they got their first order. And it only makes sense for me to have at least one of these. I'm modeling between 1948 and 1952. I really like the RS-3s, and because the Reading had so many, I should have at least one. Now, the other question is, why this particular model? Now, Atlas made a RS-3 and in the Reading paint scheme, but the Atlas model, honestly, I don't think is the best one. The Atlas model has a really wide short and long hood to fit the giant motors that are in it, and I believe the cab on the Atlas model is the correct size, but so is this one, and this has the narrower body, because of the different motors that were used when this one was built. There are also a couple spotting features, I guess, on this that are more similar to the Reading model that I'm trying to recreate. I'm doing one of the first run RS-3s that the Reading had, which had the eyeball headlight that you can see here in the big single piece, and it had an air-cooled turbo, which it has to do with the way that the smokestack is mounted. If the smokestack is mounted, or the exhaust stack rather, is mounted longitudinally with the length of the locomotive, it is an air-cooled turbo. When they switched over to water-cooled turbos, they all rotated 90 degrees and went transversely mounted. And most of the time when you look at pictures of the Reading RS-3s or any RS-3, most of the time they have water-cooled turbos. That switch happened rather early on, I believe, in their existence, and just proved to be a much better, more reliable design. The K-Line RS-3 also has this 3-chime horn up here on the cab. Now, this was something that the Reading had. They used a 3-chime horn. I don't know exactly which one, but most of the 3-rail O-scale models out there have a single-chime horn on top. That's probably some sort of like Leslie 200 or Leslie 125 or something like that. But the only exception to that, I believe, is the Williams RS-3, which also has this same exact 3-chime. There are a couple things about this engine that I am going to be trying to correct. Obviously, the first one being that the exhaust stack is missing. Second one being this gap between the truck and the frame. This was something that was known on a lot of the early K-Line RS-3s. This gap is just massive, and they did fix this on later runs. And I have a couple ideas for how I can try to correct this one to pull the trucks a little bit tighter up to the frame and try to eliminate that huge gap. But we'll get more into that a little bit later. And the last thing is that this is currently set up as short hood forward, and you can tell by the way that the engineer slash conductor is in the cab. I guess that would be the engineer. He's pointed towards the short hood. We also have the F down here on the short hood, which would signify that this is the front. Now, the Cotton Belt did actually run their RS-3 short hood forward, and not a lot of railroads did, which I find interesting. Most of the time, the RS-3s were run long hood forward, but a couple railroads did do short hood forward. The Reading did run all of their RS-3s long hood forward, and even when they switched everything over to short hood forward operation, I can't remember what year that was, I want to say sometime in the mid-50s, they still kept the RS-3s as long hood forward. Why, I have no idea, but they just did. So I will be switching this engine to long hood forward. Now that's going to be quite easy because this does not have the TMCC electronics in it that K-Line had originally packaged this thing with. Those electronics were gutted probably sometime long ago, but for the price that I got this, I am amazed that it has electronics in it at all. This has, I think it's like a Williams-style reversing unit, where it's basically just a big relay and some big old circuit boards, and all it does is work just like a mechanical E-unit. It just changes the direction of the engine with no sounds in conventional control. So very simple, very straightforward, takes up a whole lot of space. But I think that's what we're going to be maintaining through this video. And in a future video, I will go through and I will upgrade this with either Electric Railroad, or I will be putting Bluenami in it, depending on what my budget allows for. There is also one more detail about the Redding engines that I will have to add, and that is that the Redding engines on the long hood had, I think they were either class or marker lights up on the top. I do have brass markers that I'm going to be adding in to create those lights. I also need to add rain gutters to this, and I think I need to remove these side panels, or these sun visors, but I need to double check my reference photos before I go ahead and tear those off. But those are some additional details that I will need to add in order to make this look correct for the Redding. You can still see some of the remnants of the TMCC. For example, the electrocouplers are in here and not hooked up to anything. Actually very nicely zip tied together, and then for some reason also like hot glued to the shell, so sure. There's also a couple switch slots. One is for the run program switch, and I believe one is for rail sounds. This is the big control board. It's got these gigantic relays and this big rectifier on it. So this is what makes our E unit, or this is what duplicates our E unit. And as you can see, this is a rather old board, and again was completely like just hot glued to, I think, this sheet, which was hot glued to the frame. So that's fun. There are a whole lot of lights in here. We've got lights for the headlight and the markers, the headlight and the number boards, front and rear, as well as the old antenna up here on the back. Now, let's see if I can... Oh, these are actually really nice. So nice style connectors. So I can remove the shell in its entirety, so that'll make that easy. And I can leave the frame off to the side for right now. Now, what this board does, I honestly don't know. This looks like some kind of soundboard, and judging by the fact that I think it's hooked to the speaker, which it is, I would guess this is a soundboard. Now, the EROM chip, or the EEPROM chip, or whatever it is, that holds the sound data would plug into this socket here, and as you can see, it is not there. So that is interesting. Not overly concerned about it. This thing is super quiet. Also, whoever decided that they were going to put this in here and got all the original electronics, first of all, knew what they were doing. They scored up the bottom of the shell to try and help the glue hold. Obviously, that was sort of in vain, but, you know, they tried. And then they marked the front and rear motors, which, you know, would obviously correlate to the front and rear of the cotton belt version of this engine. So this would be the short hood, this would be the long hood. Because this is more or less a reversible frame, I don't know how much... Oh, no, it's not a reversible frame, because the fuel tank exists, and those details will depend on the orientation of the shell. Aha, okay. So I will need to verify that with some reference photos. But my first order of business here is I'm going to add the exhaust stack to the shell and let that start drying. I may also do the marker lights while I'm at it. And then while the glue is setting up for that, I'm going to start on this frame and see if I can figure out how to either flip the frame upside down or work out an alternative method of bringing these trucks up. By the way, to get the shell off, there are 4 screws, one on each corner. Very simple design. And there's only 2 left in this one. One of them's a flathead, and one of them's a Phillips, which I find kind of amusing. But I can probably find replacement screws for that. Now, as for detail parts, I am using Precision Scale Company, O-Scale, brass details. This is the stack for an RS series, or an Alco RS series. I believe that's just what it's called. I don't think it has an actual name on it. It's part 56193 from Precision Scale. Are these people, is Precision Scale still around? Is this still a company that makes stuff? Because I don't know. It'd be neat if they did, but I think they went out of business a little while ago. I'm not sure. Anyway, let's open this thing up. Also, yeah, every time you watch one of my videos, I have a different way of opening a bag. It's literally just whatever is in front of me. As I may have said, I do need to do a little bit of post-processing on these. I do need to trim off some brass and probably sand down some of the sprue, or what's left of the sprue, when I'm done cutting it. And then hopefully this just kind of fits in there, which it doesn't look like it's going to. So I'm probably going to need to also sand down the base of this stack so that it fits into the existing slot. That, or try to widen this slot so that this fits into there. But let me get started on that, and I will show you guys what I have when I'm done. Well, that got messy real fast. I broke out the Dremel because I started by sanding it with 80 grit, and then 220, and then 400. Those are the wrong ones. 80, 220, 400. And then I realized that took forever, so I got the grinding wheel out, and this took, I don't know, about 15-ish minutes. And I basically had to remove all of the detail on the sides, which is a little disappointing. And then I had to pull in the short ends, the front and the back, just a little bit. And now it pretty well sits in that original slot. Now, this was something that the K-Line engines were known for, was losing this stack. It's actually written in one of the first reviews that was ever published for this engine. This stack just likes to come off. So I'm not surprised that that's missing. Again, got this for real cheap from an estate sale, so not surprised. But yeah, so that's the stack. I will need to play with its front to back level a little bit, but it's pretty squared up on the front, so that's good. But yeah, I'm gonna keep tinkering with this for a little bit now that I'm completely covered in brass dust. And try and get this as level and square as possible. And yeah. Now, there are probably 1,000,001 ways to secure brass to plastic. Honestly, just by pressing this in, I can get this to be a pretty firm connection. But I do want to actually put some glue on it to hold it in place. So I'm going to do what I'm familiar with and use super glue. So I'm going to start by scoring up the mating interfaces, just to give it some ribs, because that's the way super glue works. It needs some amount of surface texture in order to bite. So let's score that up a little bit, and then I'll take my brass and I will score this up. The more scoring you can put on it, the better it will adhere. Also, if you're really good, you can get some cross hatching in there. Also, if you're new to this kind of thing, like scoring stuff with an X-Acto knife, and you have cut-resistant gloves, wear them. I cannot tell you how many holes I have put in my hand from going to score things, missing, going too far down, and puncturing my finger. Learn from my mistakes, as I clearly have not. So, anywho. So now that that's pretty well scored up, I'm going to just take some super glue. I'm going to apply it to the smokestack. I'm just going to put it on the edges and then maybe a thin bead along the thinner walls. I'm going to spread it out with the tip of the applicator. And the reason I'm putting it on the smokestack first is so that it doesn't adhere until I have the stack fully engaged, or at least engaged to the point that I would like it. And at this point, it's just a matter of going back and forth until you find the alignment that you like, knowing that you really don't have a whole lot of time to work with super glue until it starts to really harden. And I think that is pretty well squared up. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's close enough. And going down the front, think that's pretty decently square. So I will let this sit and cure for a little bit. And in the meantime, I'm going to start taking a look at these markers, because I may put these on before I start playing with the frame. I have an idea for how to put lights in these. I just need to figure out if I actually want to do it or not. So I just did a little bit of research, and these are markers. They are not class lights. I believe the Reading used flags for classifications, and they just had actual like illuminated markers. I'm using part number 40991 from Precision Scale to create mine. And as far as I can tell from the reference photos, these would have been red. So they would only be on when the engine was in reverse and there was nothing hooked to the front of the locomotive. So this would be the back of the train. So for this model, if I can figure out how to put lights in these, I will have these on when the engine is in reverse and off when the engine is going forward. So now comes the fun part of, can I actually put lights in these? Now, it is nice because they're O-scale. They do have a hole in the bottom, so you can run a light up through the bottom. The problem I'm going to run into is, how do I get a light, or get the wires to very sneakily come up either through the mount or run directly underneath of the post and go into the boiler, or into the shell. I've been working on too many steam engines. So I have this. This is, what is this? 1.5 millimeter by 0.225 millimeter, number 9831, brass tubing. So it is hollow. Right now the ends are crimped because the last time I used this was for the Reading T1. But if I use this, yeah, the shaft is really thick, but then I can run my lighting, the wiring for my lighting, through this tubing and into the shell. It also gives me a little bit more meat to hold these lights to the shell, which will be kind of nice. Problem with this is that if I want to do it, I have to drill holes in this brass. Now, I've done this before. Wasn't this easy. This will be relatively simple because that's a pretty thin piece of brass. But for a HO scale PRR M1A that I had built, I did make illuminated markers. Now, in HO scale, these markers are solid brass. So I spent the better part of 4 days drilling out those solid brass markers so that I could put lights in it. And that was low-key traumatizing. Don't want to really do that again. But this hopefully shouldn't be too bad. So I'm going to try a couple configurations of this, see if I can figure out how to make these two things made up, figure out if I have the right drill bit size, and see if I can figure out how to attach them, either with solder or with glue, to make it so that they last a decent amount of time. So I will let you guys know when I figured more out about how to do that, or if I have failed in this endeavor. So what I ended up doing is I just drilled a 1/16 inch hole through the bracket on the marker and through the shell, and then lined them up to roughly be in the correct position. I then took some small brass wire, I don't know exactly what diameter this is, and I recreated the support struts for them. And these aren't just cosmetic, they do actually help support these markers because they're really only held on by the corner of that L bracket to the shell because it's arched. So this actually does serve a functional purpose and not just a cosmetic one, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm going to let the glue set up on this and just give it as much time to dry as I possibly can by starting on the frame. Also, remember when I said learn from my mistakes? But yeah, so I'm going to, my first plan is to see if I can just flip the frame upside down, because it should just be like an extruded sheet metal frame. But there's some rust over here. That's okay. I may have to treat that. But yeah, so if I flip the frame upside down, theoretically, these little step-down brackets, it'll make more sense when I have the thing blown apart, but there's step-down brackets here that mount the motor. theoretically those will now be lifted up, which will pull the whole truck up. The problem I'm going to run into is, do these motors then hit the inside of the shell? So yeah, let's get started here. So I got the trucks off of the frame, and here it is. I still have the speaker enclosure on / fuel tank. I will be taking that off in a second, but this is those recessed plates I was talking about, little dip down things. And as you can tell, the motor sits on that and rides on this track, basically. And because that plate sits substantially lower than the bottom of the frame, that drops the truck assembly down. Now, it's great for 3-rail O-scale if you're trying to, do tight curves, or if you just want a toyish look, or you want something with a little bit more ground clearance if you're going over steep inclines and declines. But for a realistic model, that's just way too much of a gap. So the idea I had was, okay, well, seeing as the handrails aren't attached to this, what if you just took that recess and you flipped it upside down? And now the motor rides on this plate, and that pulls the truck up a little bit. Now, there's two issues I foresee with this. One is this lip here on what is currently the top of the frame, and how that interfaces with the shell. And the second one is these motors being lifted up that amount may cause them to collide with the top of the shell. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm going to take this fuel tank off. That has a speaker in it. That's actually really heavy. And I'll start trying to figure out how all this can go back together and see if I can figure out how to lift these motors up and if that plan will work. So I've run into a problem with my plan. As you can see, there are 2 blocks on top of the truck here, and those ride on that lower plate, and that is more or less what sets your frame height. So if I was to just flip this upside down, those steps no longer contact this plate, and now the truck is these brake cylinders are what are contacting the frame. So not great. Really good frame height, but not what we are going for. Now, if I line up those blocks roughly with the frame, you can see that we do have a bit of height. It's probably higher than what is prototypical, but it's better than that, which is what it currently sits at, basically. So I think what I'm going to do is try to make these flat with the frame. The other issue is this does not fit in the shell, and the reason for that is because the body that I intentionally got the K-line one because it was a little bit narrower is too narrow, and these will collide with the shell. So that does not work. So these will likely have to get cut off and ground down and made flush, and then probably soldered into place where they are completely flat with the frame. Advantage to that is that I can keep all this stuff down and keep all the nice lettering on the outside. You may have also noticed I did a little bit of grinding over here. This is where all that rust was. I just wanted to get that ground away and gone. I don't like the idea of rust sitting on a steel frame for any amount of time. And maybe it's just too much time in automotive, but I don't like rust. So let's just get rid of it. We're in here, might as well. Why make it a later date problem when we can just do it now and I have the tools all out? So anyway, I'm going to start on that, and we'll see how that goes, and hopefully we end up with a good result, because the second I start cutting this, it's not going to be easy to put it back the way that it is. So several hours of metalworking and fabrication later, here's what we got. The steps are slightly different heights, if you can't tell. This one is slightly lower than this one. I did figure out that at this height, you can just flip it upside down, and it gets really close to the correct height. But I'm gonna put the motors and the trucks in, and I want to see how noticeable that height difference is. Also, yeah, I need to bend this back into shape. But yeah, if I need to lower this, I can. I just need to more or less cut out what I put in and then just drop it in a little bit. But hopefully that won't be necessary. But let's throw these trucks in and figure out how much I messed this up. Is it perfect? No, not really. Is it better? Yes, absolutely it is. The gap is shorter, not by much, but it is. And the problem I'm running into now is this step is getting really close to the pilot. Now, yeah, I could just go to fixed pilots, chop this off, and just have the truck rotating, but then I lose my electrocoupler, and I kind of like having that option for a switcher, especially if I'm running this on our layout that we take to train shows. So yeah, I want to keep that electrocoupler, which means the pilot has to stay on the truck, which means that that is my limiting factor. Now, there is another way that I can continue to lower this, and that is by chopping those blocks off. I could redo all of the metal work I just did, but I'm really not in the mood to do that. So I think I'll just take those blocks that the shell just, or the frame sits on, and if I just make them lower, that brings the whole shell down on top of it. So I need to make sure that there's enough clearance up here for the truck and the walkway to make sure that I can still go over bumps and turn. And I also need to make sure that there is enough clearance between the truck frames and the screws on the fuel tank, which is less of a problem when it's in the correct configuration. When you flip the frame upside down, that becomes a binding point. Also, yeah, when you flip the frame upside down on this thing, it looks really good. The frame is basically hugging the trucks, which is exactly what I want, but it also doesn't fit. You can't put the shell onto the frame if it's in that configuration, and the fuel tank doesn't really seal to the bottom either, and because the fuel tank is where the speaker is, I need that to have a good seal. So yeah, flipping the frame upside down is not really a great option. So it's really going to be up to that metalwork and whatever I can do to those lower stops on the trucks. So I'll keep playing with it, and I'll show you guys what the final result is. So it's been a couple hours, and as you can see, there is brass dust everywhere. It was all over the desk too. I just finished cleaning up. It's like 9:30 at night, and I need to stop making noise because if there are kids in either of the apartments on either side of me, they're probably going to bed soon. So I need to stop being, a menace and being really loud. So this will be a tomorrow problem. But basically, when you lower an engine, anything that is referenced to the frame that mounts to the shell will be fine, because all you're doing basically is you're just lowering the frame. And because the shell mounts to the frame, if you have like a smoke unit, for example, that's mounted to the frame, when you lower it, it's not going to clash with the shell because that distance is still the same. The motors, on the other hand, are not attached to the frame. They are attached to the trucks. So as you lower the frame, the motors stay at the same height, which basically means that you're bringing the top of the shell down to the motors. That means that in pretty much any engine, if you're trying to lower it, the first thing in your locomotive that's going to contact the shell and start, causing problems are the motors, because they're tall and they're, again, mounted directly to the trucks. Now, when I was putting this together, I figured I could I could determine if there was interference by putting the motor back in, putting all the gearing back together, putting the shell back on, and rotating the truck, figuring that I would feel any resistance if the flywheel was binding with the shell. The problem with that is that I had my torques reversed. The high torque end down here does not turn easily when subjected to any kind of load. If I try and turn the wheels by hand, it's really hard to do. However, the motor, the flywheel, is the low torque end of the driveline, so this actually turns relatively easily. So when you sandwich it up against the shell and you turn the truck, this has no problem rotating. So as I was putting the shell back on and sandwiching it and turning the truck, it was just turning this. If you want to use that as a metric, put a mark on your wheels and you can see if the motor is turning, because the mark on the wheel will rotate back and forth slightly as the motor is turning back and forth, depending on if you have enough or if you don't have enough backlash in all your gears to essentially negate the amount of motion from the you rotating the truck. And what I mean by that is that every gear sets, there's a certain amount of range where the teeth don't engage with each other. That's called backlash. So if you move one of the gears, it takes a second for it to engage the other gear, if that makes sense. So easy way to tell is you just rotate this a little bit and you can see if your truck is moving. So as you can see, I get a little bit of motion, but really not much. And that's probably all of the range of motion that I have for rotating the truck. So not really a great metric for this particular locomotive. The gearing and the backlash just doesn't allow me to do it. So what ended up happening was I put the shell back on and everything rubbed. It barely ran because I was just crimping the flywheels down with the shell. So I loosened everything back up and took the next 4 hours to try to figure out what was rubbing, and what it came down to was I needed to clearance out the shell a lot until I started getting to the point where the shell started deforming because of the heat being generated by me clearancing it with the Dremel, or I had a brilliant moment of clarity at one point where I just put a piece of sandpaper on the flywheel. That worked great until it started to come through the shell, and then I had to stop doing that. At which point I had to start attacking the flywheels, which is why you see all the brass dust everywhere. So if I can't make the shell higher, I have to make the flywheels lower, which is substantially harder. So if you've got a high hood locomotive, you probably won't have this issue. But if you've got a low hood engine like this, that's going to be a struggle. Now, the reason I have the Sharpie on the motors, or on the flywheels, is to sort of act like that blue paint that you put on parts that you're machining, to either score it and have an easy mark or figure out what your interferences are when you're assembling it. I don't have that paint, so I just put some Sharpie marks on, put the engine on the test stand, set the shell on, ran the motors, and then slowly let the shell sit down onto the frame, and basically wherever it would rub on the motor, it would rub away the Sharpie mark, and that's how I could tell where I needed to bring down the flywheel or bring up the shell. And by the end it was just the flywheel. But as it sits currently, the back motor is just fine. The short hood motor, I should say, is fine. Doesn't rub anymore, even if I clamp down the shell onto the frame. This doesn't rub, so that one's good. This one still does. It has a little bit of rubbing right on the edge of where I expanded the chamfer, the edge of the flywheel, and then the recess that I had to cut into the middle, because right now it's sort of cup-shaped in the center, and the reason for that is because of a bunch of the components inside that connect to the fan screen. Those were rubbing up against the flywheel, so I had to basically cup out the top of the flywheel to provide clearance for those components. So tomorrow what I'm going to do, probably after work, is take my Dremel again, and I've been putting it on the test stand, and I've been running it, and I've been running the Dremel with the grinding wheel the opposite direction that the motor is rotating. So if the motor is turning this way, I will have the Dremel going this way on this side to sort of have it fight itself. And I will take off that edge some more, and try to clean out the cup a little bit more where it is rubbing. Obviously you can keep going at the shell, but I am almost out of room there, so I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just going to keep going at the flywheels. This would be really easy if I could just press the flywheels down some more. It's not that there isn't the room to do it, it's just I don't have the tools here to actually press down this flywheel without crushing the motor case. So that's out of the question for me right now. But anyway, that is how this currently sits. I'm going to be calling it for tonight. I'm going to try and clean up a little bit. I need to wash all this off. I would vacuum it and brush it just to, be nice to all the electronics, but again, I'm trying not to make too much noise. So I think I'm just going to protect anything that can't get wet and then just wash the whole thing down, and that should take all of this dust off. I do need to be careful about the truck, so the frame will probably be coming off to do that. But regardless, that's where it sits. That's the plan. I will talk to you guys probably tomorrow when I hopefully have this all sorted out and I can start on paint. Still have the last little bit of cleaning that I have to do on the frame and the rest of my workbench and the electronics, but these flywheels are finally at the height where they don't rub, and they are substantially shorter than they were when they started. But they're all nice and clean now. I did a finishing pass with some 220 and then some 400, and then just wiped off the last of the Sharpie with some isopropyl alcohol, and got me a pretty nice finish. It's very smooth too, which is why I'm playing with it. But anyway, I do need to fix this bracket again, so I'm gonna have to take the shell off anyway, but I needed to do that to clean off all the dust. So yeah, anyway, these are still hot. Nice. I'm gonna go do that and clean all this up, and we'll put the shell back on, and I will show you guys how it sits and how it runs now that it's all, nice and quiet again. Unfortunately, I didn't realize until after the shell was back on, but the E-unit lockout switch is currently set to locked out, going in what will be the forward direction. But if I power it up, you can hear there's no rubbing of the motors against the shell. It's just completely quiet. Well, as quiet as it can be. And way, way better than it was. And if you were wondering about me messing up the balance of the flywheels by doing the process that I did, as you could see by going all the way up, the engine's not vibrating violently, so they're balanced enough. When I was grinding away at it, I had the motors turning to sort of use it like a lathe, and that apparently got them well enough that, it sits pretty level when it's running. Anyway, let me get you guys at a good angle to see how much lower this thing is. It is nice to know that after 2 days of grinding and cutting and forming and soldering and shaping and test fitting and clearancing, it finally is done, for the most part, and it looks really good. I have the front and rear decks more or less riding on the pilots, which is as low as it can go. And as you can see, the front's still a little high. I am going to need to go in and tweak that because right now it's not perfectly level. And again, it's a little high. But I need to be really careful because I am done cutting the flywheels. I don't want to do that anymore, so I can't lower it too much because that will cause clearance problems. But yeah, if you're looking to get an earlier K-Line RS-3 and you want to lower it the way that I have, go for it. I don't recommend it. If you can get a later version, do that. If you need to get an early version, this is a lot of work. So if you're comfortable with it, go for it. If you're not, get a later one. That's because all of that work, and it looks like the later version. And the later version might honestly sit lower than what I currently have. But this was cheap. This is what I could get. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I decided I wanted to drop this thing to the ground. But here we are. So again, a couple more tweaks I have to do, but for the most part, I think this is almost ready for paint. So I can start cleaning it up with isopropyl alcohol. I can start trying to take off the old decals and cleaning it up to hopefully hide as many of the original graphics as I possibly can. I do have RS-3 decals that I got a little while ago, and I'm hoping that they look halfway decent on this model. But that's going to be a later date problem because right now I am tired and it's really late. So I am done working on this for today. I will probably pick it up tomorrow if I've got time, but I will certainly be giving you guys updates as we go and the painting process begins and the decaling and so on and so forth. So stick around for that. And I will see you guys the next time I'm working on this. So I've got the whole engine blown apart again. It's ready to go. I fixed the front blocks. They're now pretty well level and really low to the frame, which is perfect. So what I need to do now is I need to finish up the cosmetics. So as you can see, I did the smokestack, I did the marker lights with their little support braces. I think I mentioned that in an earlier shot. What I'm going to do now are the rain gutters. These are a feature of pretty much all Redding diesels. And it's something that's kind of unique to the Redding. All it really was like angle iron shaped in a V right above the cab window, and it was supposed to take the rain that fell on the roof and just guide it around the window instead of, falling into the window. They also did not have these sunshades, so I'm going to snap these off. But yeah, all I'm using to make it is this .060 or 60 thou or 1.5 mil. Basically L bracket or angle piece. It's just styrene. I don't know the exact lengths yet because it's different for every cab that you do. I think I mentioned it in the Redding Trainmaster repaint video because I used the same material and the same process that I'm going to use here for that. But I'm going to do one side and I'll let you guys know what the length is, and then you guys can have that as a note if you're also doing the Redding. So first up, let's snap off this this sun visor. I don't know why the Redding didn't have sun visors, but they didn't. So this has to go, and it doesn't really want to come off. So hats off to you, K-Line, for putting this on rather durably. Sweet. Looks like I probably could have tried to slip that out, but that's going to be fine. I'm probably going to actually sand that down at some point. Just try to clean up this edge a little bit with an X-Acto knife. Good enough. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of angle iron. I'm going to take my L bracket, or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to put it, I don't know, a little bit in on this side and try to cut it an equal distance on the other side. So I'll give it a little mark. Let's see where that is. Then you can cut it, and now you can see it's probably about the length that we want, but you can't really bend it very well. So to fix that problem, what we're going to do is we're going to cut into the middle here. I'm going to try and find the exact middle, which is going to be a struggle. So about there-ish. And I'm just going to cut one end of this L bracket so that it will now bend like so. And then I can take it and we can mock it up against the window, and I think that's about right. I'll have to compare it to a reference photo to see if I need to trim down the length. It might be a little too close to the front and the rear of the cab, but that's the idea. And then I will score up underneath of it with my X-Acto knife and score the whatever bracket's going to be my my mounting side, and glue that on with some super glue, and it should hopefully stick forever. And so you go to put it, if you have the original box, I learned this with the Trainmaster, the original box does not take into account this thing, usually. I actually had to cut out chunks of the Trainmaster box to make room for the rain gutters, because the top bit of foam would not sit on the lower piece, like they wouldn't join fully. And it wouldn't go back in the box because it was interfering with these things. And then when I took it off, it had snapped these off. So not ideal. So keep that in mind if you're if you're doing this and you're planning on reusing the original box. If it's a fit, like a foam fit, you might need to clearance it a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to finish this up, and I will show you guys what the final product looks like. So these are about an inch and a quarter long, and I just have them positioned to look roughly like the prototype. I think it's good enough. So I'm going to start trying to get these decals off. I've got no idea how I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with isopropyl alcohol and see what kind of damage that does. But I've got some sandpaper out. This is 1500 grit in preparation to have to go at it a little bit more aggressively. But hopefully I won't need to, go over this with a flat blade X-Acto, because that could take off a lot more detail than I want. But we'll see how this goes. Alright, I think it's time for paint. I got as much of the decals off as I could. These ones I aggressively wiped down with isopropyl alcohol. These ones I took off with sandpaper just because it was faster. I did remove the long hood and the short hood from the frame to try to get at these front stripes as best as I possibly could. I know that you're going to be able to see the lip a little bit. The silver is not as bad. You can't even really notice that it's 2 layers of paint, so I think that'll be okay. But that orange was really thick, so I wanted to try to get rid of that as much as I possibly could. I do have the headlight, or both headlights, taped up inside. I have all the wires just kept up in here to just keep it somewhat neat. I pulled out as much of the glass as I could, or the plastic inserts as I possibly could. So, yeah, there's not really much else left to do here, but get my airbrush set up and start hitting this thing with a bunch of primer. My poor pump is like massively overheating. It's so hot. Anyway, here's the primer. Yeah, it's primer. It's black. This is just Vallejo black primer. It's nothing too fancy. This is just to give the airbrush paint something to bite into, and I use black because most of the time I'm painting in darker colors. So if I miss spots, they're not as easily noticeable. For tonight, I think I'm just going to paint some of the black pieces. So like the frame, the truck frames, the pilot. I'll leave the shell and its Pullman green for tomorrow, probably. 1, because my pump is overheating, and 2, because it's getting late. And the airbrush, the primer is already black, so putting black paint in it and going over it, all it's really going to do is it's just going to change the surface texture a little bit. So it's not going to be super rough and coarse, so that, the paint can bite into it. It'll actually be the paint, which will look a little bit smoother, and not look as speckled as the primer does. So that's the idea. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm just using Vallejo Model Air paints. I will be weathering this engine, so once this is all painted and decaled and everything, I will do that. I'm not going to show it in detail because I basically just reuse existing weathering techniques. If you watch Norm's trains, that's pretty much just what I do. He does a really great job explaining his weathering techniques in his videos, but it's basically just that, similar colors as well. But I'll be doing that later. Right now I just need to get paint done, so I'm gonna keep at it, and I will see you guys probably tomorrow when I'm ready to do the shell in Pullman green. Okay, so a couple things. One, the frame's back together. I did this late last night because I wanted to. I don't know. And this is now painted. The red and green that all the diesels are in is just Pullman green. It's basically just like your default color, which I find kind of funny. I'm using this True Color paint. Not sure who makes this. Oh, True Color Paint LLC. Yeah, so that's what I'm using. Pullman green. It makes a really good finish. It comes out of the airbrush really nicely. I got thinner for it. Really didn't need it, if I remember correctly. It was either that or I thinned it when I first got it and did the Trainmaster, and this still has the thinner in it. But really, really nice paint. Goes on super easy. You don't need a ton of it. I more or less filled my smaller reservoir on my airbrush, and that took me for, I don't even know, 25 minutes of spraying it. So that was pretty nice. Got a pretty good coat on it, and I think it's ready for decals. But to do decals, you can't put it on a flat black or a flat anything paint. So I have an acrylic clear coat. That's a aerosol can that I've been using to. I originally got it for making my own water slide decals, but it also works really well for getting a nice gloss coat to put decals on. So I'm going to take that, shake it up, spray it on, and give this a glossy finish in the areas where decals will be applied. Gloss coat is on. It doesn't look great, but you know, I'm just going to be going over it with a flat anyway, so all the little imperfections and whatnot that you can see because it's shiny will be hidden. But yeah, I think I'm ready to start doing decals now. I'm going to be using two sets. I've got this, which I believe is from, I want to say K4? No, CMR. This one's CMR. This is a Redding RS-3 decal set. It's got most of what you need. It is missing a couple things. Like, it doesn't have the RS1 class number because the Redding classified the RS3 as an RS1 for road switcher, and it's the first one that they had. So it's missing that, and it's missing the safety is your job decals. But it has all like the numbers for the number boards. I'm not. Oh, these are what go on the ends of the car body, or the long and short hood rather. So it's got those. It's got the 1600 horsepower, which the Redding like to mark horsepower numbers on all of their engines. And then I'm going to be trying to use these. These are decals that I had made for my FM Trainmaster. And this has a couple more bits of text that the CMR decals don't have, like the safety is your job. And this has RS4 on it. And I looked around and I can't find a one that's the correct size, so kind of SOL there. This also has the F1 and the 2 that were used for the front and rear designations. The Redding had an F and a 1 up front and a 2 in the rear. Why the numbers were there, I don't know. I think every other railroad used just the F. But yeah, so I've got those here for the Trainmaster, so hopefully they fit. But we'll find out. So let me get started on this, and I'll get one side done and show you how it looks. Okay, so some things have been learned. One, I'm being super careful to do this first try on all of them, because if I mess it up, then I can't do a second RS-3 if I ever get one. But also, the 5s stick really well, and the 3s give you a lot of working time for some reason. The 0s seem to be right in the middle. Especially with these little guys, because they're so small, they just stick immediately, so be really careful. I'm not sure if you can tell on that one, but I broke the 5 a little bit trying to move it, because the second I laid it down, it stuck like a rock. Did not want to move, so sort of fighting that. The 1600 horsepower came out great. The 503, when I hit it with micro sol, they sort of like bubbled up. So I haven't hit any of the other ones with it. I don't think it'll need it. They're sticking really well as is. But I had to sort of let it dry a little bit and then pat it down with my finger in order to actually get it to sit flat, because it was like bowed outward. But the backing material is hiding into the decals really well. They don't seem to care how long you keep them in the water, which is really nice. And I think they're going to clean up really well when I hit it with a flat. So I'm going to keep going around. I just have this side done right now. I'm going to do the other side and then the ends of the hoods so that I can do the safety is your job, hopefully, and then the numbers that go on the bottom of each of those hoods. But yeah, next time you see this, hopefully all the decals will be on. So, here's where it's going to sit for tonight, at least. And tomorrow I will go over it with a flat clear after I do all the yellow accenting on the handrails and everything. But yeah, I am really happy with how that turned out. There's the numbers on the ends of the hood. So yeah, I do need to look into getting gallery glass and figuring out how to run LEDs into these markers, because I do want to light these and I have an idea on how to do it. I just need to actually do it. I drilled really small holes. I can't remember if I showed you that in a previous segment, but they're tiny. They're meant for magnet wire for 0402 SMD LEDs that I may have in red, hopefully. But I need to figure out if I want to do gallery glass or if I'm going to try canopy glue in there, and I don't know. I'll figure that out another time. But for right now, I'm just going to let this sit and dry overnight, and we will pick it up when I'm ready to do a flat clear. So I went around with this Tester's Gloss Yellow, and I did the suicide steps. I added these grab irons separately on the end, and then I hand painted all of the railings that needed to be painted. So I did also realize that I forgot the F1 and the 2 yesterday, so I added those on real quick. And I'm getting ready to hit this whole thing with a flat clear. I'm using Vallejo matte varnish, but that should hopefully get rid of the shine from the gloss paint, hide the decals a little better, and take down some of the gloss from the yellow paint. So I'm doing this with the windows out still so that I don't cover the windows in flat clear. And then once the whole engine is cleared, then I can put the glass back in, or at least the front glass, and I can start the weathering process. And just like that, we have a locomotive ready for weathering. I think it looks really good. It definitely has a good side and a bad side. This is its good side, believe it or not. The bad side is the decal didn't go quite the way I wanted it to. I may hit that or try to hit that with microset again, but I'm afraid now that the clear coat's on it, all it's going to do is just make a mess. So I may just leave that as is in an attempt to not make it worse. But it's ready for reassembly now. And yeah, I know, I'm leaving the slit where the sun visor used to be on both sides, and I'm not filling the dent made by the heat from clearancing it. Maybe I'll do that sometime in the future as like a touch-up project, but it's not bothering me for right now, so I'm happy to just leave it as is. But yeah, I'm going to tear all the masking tape off of this. I'm going to reconnect this with the frame, and we'll get our first look of the newly painted reassembled engine, and then it will go right into weathering, and I'm going to do like a really light, sort of fresh off the assembly line, barely used sort of look. Okay, so I've had a slight change in plans. As you can see, the engine's back together now, but the masking tape is still on it. So I need to take the shell off again anyway after I'm done doing this, because I need to put in the marker lights. So if I have to take the shell off again anyway, why would I put the whole thing back together and risk getting paint on the clear plastic pieces? So that's why that's like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go across the bottom with like a Vallejo black gray to act as sort of like a grime, and then I'll do some sand yellow on the pilots to sort of emulate the sand getting kicked up from the rails. I'll probably go through with a little bit of rust on, say, the couplers, maybe the bearings. And yeah, these do have roller bearings, even though I think in the early 50s, I think it was just friction bearings. I'm not sure. I'd have to do a little bit more research on that. But anyway, I'll also put a little bit of like light earth or dark earth on the ends of the trucks as well to act like, you know, dirt getting kicked up. But yeah, we'll see how that turns out. and hopefully I don't overdo it, because again, I'm trying to... These engines were delivered to the Reading in 1951, and the latest year I'm modeling is 1953, so these are going to look pretty clean. So definitely don't want to overdo it, but let's give it a shot and see how it turns out. So even in the terrible lighting that I have in my room, this thing still looks great. I'm a huge fan of the lightly weathered look, and going for early 50s, that's sort of what all the rolling stock and equipment looked like. So I think I hit it pretty well on the head here with just some light grime, some light rust, some dark earth, and some sand up on the pilot steps and on the walkways to show walk paths. So you guys can let me know what you think down in the comments, but I am very happy with this. So next up, as I said, is to finish up the, well, first of all, I gotta put all the windows back in, but then finish up all the electronics and figure out how in the world I'm gonna put markers in this thing. But that's gonna be a tomorrow problem because it's late and I've done a lot today. So I'll see you guys when it's time to start doing electrical. Okay, let's put some lights in this thing. So I started with looking at my 3mm warm white LEDs. They don't fit, they're too big. So I looked at these are like, they're not 2mm, but they're pretty close to 2mm granite wheat bulbs. These don't fit because they're too tall. These are too wide. So I started looking at these. These are 2mm LEDs that Lionel likes to put in pretty much everything. These do fit. The problem is, in order to make them fit, I have to break off the lower support wire that's in there, because that's currently blocking any amount of access that I have to put a light in the bottom. That's probably the route that I'm going to end up taking, because these will pretty flushly fit in the bottom, so it blocks light from coming out of the bottom part of the marker. But I can also fix that with paint if I go with the last option, which are, I have a ton of 0402 SMD LEDs in here. I've got white, I've got green, I've got red. So I am going to see how those look. Those ones are nice because they have magnet wire on them. So they fit through the really teeny tiny holes that I drilled in this thing. Whereas this one, I'm going to need to bore out those holes a little bit more. And then, you got these big cables running into the shell. So I think I'm going to try the SMD LEDs first and figure out if I can, finagle them into place. I need to verify, these like to fail a lot. So I did get gallery glass. If I have to use a white LED, I got the ruby red. I'm going to test how these look when they dry. I have a spare piece of aluminum foil over here because I don't have parchment paper for some reason. So I'm going to see how these look when they dry. I'm not using canopy glue. I was originally going to thinking I could use canopy glue, but I wasn't super happy with how that turned out the last time I used it for a lens. It never fully cured, and there was always this bit of haziness in the middle, and that was just a lens. That was just a drop. And this is obviously a little bit more material than that. So if I can get a red light in there, I'll use the clear stuff to make it look a little bit more realistic and look like a lens. But if I need to use a white light, I've got the red, so hopefully that helps tone down the white a little bit. But I'm going to start experimenting, seeing what fits where, and we'll go from there. So I did end up going with the SMD LEDs. They are in there. They are tiny, so you really can't see them. The wires are really nicely tucked up underneath each of the marker lights. I'm going to go back through and put a little bit of paint on by hand just to touch up some bits where I accidentally rubbed it off, and try and hide those wires a little bit more, but they are pretty well concealed. You can see them when you look straight on, how they kind of hang under and then go in the side. But I'm pretty happy with that, and they do light up. I tested them with a battery. I'm going to hook up a 1K resistor to these guys and plug them into the lighting circuit for the rear lights, so that when it's going backwards, these lights turn on, and when it's going forwards, these lights turn off, is the idea. We'll see how that ends up going. But I do have the gallery glasses drying. I'm a little hesitant to just put it straight into the lens. I did some research, I looked it up. You can very obviously tell on real locomotive marker lights the lenses are the color that the light is supposed to be. It's not like a clear lens with a colored light behind it because, that's just how that works. So I would like to use the red. But the more research I do, the more it looks like the red is like super opaque. And I'm worried that I'm going to drown out these little tiny LEDs with that red if that red is too opaque. So worst case scenario, I can go to the clear, but I'm thinking I'm going to let this dry a little bit, just see how opaque it is with my own eyes, and determine if I think that these little LEDs are going to be able to shine through that. That's also going to be something I'm going to test when this is hooked up and like actually wired in, is I want to see how bright those lights actually are. If I remember correctly from my mountain class, my HO mountain class, which had these same LEDs in it, they're actually really bright with 1K, like kind of surprisingly bright for how small they are. But again, I only get one shot at this, so I really don't want to mess it up. So anyway, I'm going to do a little bit of wiring and a little bit of touch-up paint, and I will see you guys when this is on the test stand, hopefully, and I can see how bright those lights are. Okay, hold on to your socks. Let's see if this works. So that's forward, I got my headlight. That'll be neutral. Oh my god. They do the thing. They light up. Let's go. We're on the last couple steps here. It is probably worth noting there are only 2 body screws in this thing, and the reason I note that is because I just blew out one of the bosses because it had threaded and it felt like it had stuck, but I wasn't entirely sure. So I had kept one hand under the frame and then tried to pick it up by the shell, which you're really never supposed to do, but I wanted to see if it was going to hold, and it did not. And the frame fell out. I lost 2 of my grab irons on the front. I snapped off one of the markers and made a big mess. So I just finished patching that up. And the last thing we got to do here is we got to take off this the masking tape that I have on the windows. So let's see if I can do this on camera for you guys. Normally I'd do this off camera so that I can actually do it without destroying the paint, but I got to get the paint out again anyway to touch up the markers. This is really a struggle. Hey, I got one piece off. Cool. That's a start. And then. Well, they need to be cleaned. But there's a window. And you may also notice the engineer's not there. And my numbers are popping up again. Alright. Let's do this side. I haven't done a rough cut of this yet. Oh, this is way easier. What the heck? I haven't done a rough cut of this video yet, so I've got no idea how long it is, so I may edit some of this out. Oh, there we go. Finally got a hold on it. There he is. Waving to the crowd. Alright. And I did install the glass in the rest of the cab and the doors as well. So Sweet. How do I put this down without touching the shell? Answers like that. Cool. So, I guess, yeah, touch-up paint and filling the markers will be the last thing here.
Yep.
So I did decide to go ahead and put the gallery glass in the markers, and they're actually dried a little bit darker than I'm thinking. They're not fully dry yet. This is probably, I don't even know, 14 hours of the 24-hour dry time. The one problem with it is that they're like convex right now, or concave right now, and I would like them to be convex, sort of like actual, marker light lenses. So I think I'm going to try to put another drop on top of this, now that they're dried a little bit more, and try to make it curve outward instead of inward. But we'll see how that goes. So I don't know if the gallery glass is fully dry yet. It's been a couple hours since I put on the additional little drops, but it's really not a lot. You don't have to like fill the marker light with gallery glass. It's a very viscous sort of liquid, so when you put it on, the surface tension of the actual material itself will basically make it form sort of like this, I don't even know what to call it, like a layer basically, that it doesn't fill the cavity, it just creates this top little layer of gallery glass. And then when that dries, you get that concave sort of lens look, which I didn't really like, so put another drop on, but again, these drops are super tiny. It looks a lot darker now that it's dried than it does when you put it on. The actual color of the gallery glass is like this pink when you get it in the bottle, and it actually comes out this really nice red color. But let's fire it up here and take a look at our markers. Yeah, I like that. I think that's a very nice, like, diffused look where it's not excessively bright, but it's also like a full lens. So you're not, when you look at it, it doesn't scream there's a single really tiny LED in here. It looks like an illuminated marker light. So I am really happy with how that turned out. So there you have it. That was my repaint and detailing of this K-Line cotton belt RS-3 into the Redding Company number 503. And overall, I am super happy with how this turned out. From the weathering to the lighted markers to the hand-painted railings everywhere. I think this looks absolutely spectacular. I did get some footage of it running before I had the gallery glass in the markers. You've already seen that, I'm sure. And this thing can pull like a surprising amount. I had almost my full consist. I was missing my Estee Lauder tank car. If you noticed that before I just mentioned it, leave a comment and let me know because I'd be amazed if somebody did. But that was the only car missing. That's a really lightweight car. So I did have all my die-cast stuff being pulled by this one locomotive, and it didn't really care, which is incredible for the fact that one of the traction tires threw itself off when I was just, building the thing. So I think there's only 3 left or 2 left on this, on some of the trucks. I can't remember which axles. But it does have a couple traction tires, so that helps. But it weighs a bunch, too. It's got a full die-cast, fuel tank, which adds a ton of weight. And then the trucks are all die-cast, which, again, helps with weight and helps with tractive power. So overall, super thrilled with this engine. I think it's going to make a great addition to my collection, and I'm looking forward to the next phase of this project. That will be me putting command control in this thing. Now, I talked in the beginning of this video about putting Blunami in this engine, and I really like Blunami. I think its functionality is great, its sound quality is great, and their diesels, the diesel sounds are fantastic. I haven't heard the Alco in person. I think this would be a great candidate for it. However, I have something in my collection already that makes the electric railroad option cheaper. I already have a DC Cruise Commander in my collection. It's just sitting in one of my drawers. I can't remember which project it came out of, but I just have a spare. So I think I'm going to use that and just get the, I want to say it's the Alco PA sound card from Electric Railroad, that Sound Commander kit. That's about, I want to say, $150 or so. But that's $50 cheaper than the $200 Blunami board. And while that difference isn't much, I already have this Cruise Commander and I should probably use it, so I'll save the $50 because I already have the other half of that system. The other nice thing about putting TMCC in this is that it means that I can use it on our club layout when we're bringing it to shows. Now, there's a slight issue that we've had in the past with our particular club and our particular layout where when you use locomotives that can be controlled by Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, it is not uncommon for either members of the public or members of other layouts to accidentally connect or intentionally connect to your locomotive just to play with it. Or in the case of an accident, they think that they're running something on their layout and they send your locomotive onto the floor. Both of those things have happened to us, which is not fun. So having a locomotive that can be accessed via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth is really just not a great idea when you're bringing locomotives to public shows. And because of that, TMCC is just a safer option because you're less likely to run into somebody from the public showing up with a TMCC controller and trying to run your trains than you are somebody with a phone. So there's also that aspect to it, and I am looking for a switcher to use on our club layout because I'd like to run my equipment. And the only thing I have that can serve that role right now is my FM Trainmaster, which is not a switcher. I know it's technically a road switcher per the Redding standards, but it's more of a mainline engine than a switcher. The RS-3 is a much smaller engine. It fits on our layout a lot better. It makes it a lot easier to switch industries. So this is probably what I will be using. So having CMCC in it has a whole bunch of advantages, from affordability to operation for this, which is why I'm not going the Blue Nami route. That doesn't mean I would discourage you from going Blue Nami. If you have a similar engine, Blue Nami is a great system, as you've seen by the 2 other projects I've done, and I'm sure countless others on YouTube. It has tons of capabilities, but for this particular application, I think TMCC is the way to go. I'm not exactly sure when that video is going to come out, but until then, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all learned something from this project. If you guys have any questions about anything I did, or how I did it, or why I did it, drop a comment down below. I love chatting with you guys down there. You guys usually have great questions or great feedback on on the projects that I do, and a lot of times you suggest stuff that I didn't even consider in doing this that would have made my life 10 times easier. So please keep commenting, keep giving me all your feedback, and I look forward to reading that and chatting with you guys down there. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. I'm CWHolo1, and have a good day, or maybe good night in your case. See ya.